Oops, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Sorry, oops. For Upper Darby's council meeting, May 26, 2021. At this point in time, if we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, we will also have a moment of silence, and Mayor Keffer has the flag in her screen. So please check her screen out. Council members, turn on your microphones.
In camera.
And, yeah, yes, and camera. At least for the beginning process. All right, so I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, nation,
One nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all.
And remain standing for a moment of silence of Chief Scott Mahoney and the loss of activists in our community. So please have a moment, and all of our fallen military and soldiers in honor of Memorial Day. Thank you. Okay, so we're officially consider this the opening of the meeting. Ms. Phillips, can you give us a roll call of our attendees?
Yes. Councilman Tunis.
Here.
Thank you. Councilwoman Phillips is here. Councilman Silva.
He is excused. He is coming. He will be joining us as soon as he possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
So he's excused until he gets here.
Councilwoman Blackwell.
Present.
Councilman Gwynn.
Present.
Councilman Burke.
Present.
Councilman Siddiq.
Present.
Councilwoman Faralia.
Present.
Councilman Barnett.
Here.
And Councilman Wagner.
Here.
And Council President Wentz.
Here. And also wanted to note that Treasurer Heyman will be here. He's teaching a class tonight, so he's not going to be able to join us until 7:45, 8 o'clock. So if we get to his report, we'll just push it forward until he gets here. And then Ms. Alexis is unable to join us this evening, or CAO Rangione. So Deputy CAO Ms. Dobbins will be fielding these CAO questions. And Mayor Keffer is here, and Solicitor Richardson is here. Solicitor Kilkenny had other obligations because we moved our meeting schedule pattern. So. And then we do have a variety of speakers that will be here throughout the evening to take part. So, okay. Next up, we have rules of meeting decorum. Upper Darby Township Council and residents will maintain professional respect for each other. Council encourages free speech, however, civility is required, which would prohibit threats, profanity, scandalous, impertinent, and redundant comment, or any comment the discernible purpose of which is to disrupt or prevent the conduct of the business of the meeting. So next up, we have a presentation by Floyd A. Wise, DCED consultant, regarding the findings of a study of the Upper Darby Fire Service. Before we do that, I should also say that we had an executive session to talk about litigation and personnel at 6:30 this evening. So, Mayor Keffer?
I just want to give a little background on the report that's that we're all going to hear and that will be to the public after the meeting. Early in 2020, my administration applied for and received this and to get a management study done on our fire department. Wise is our point person on this report. He's also a member of the Harrisburg Fire Department. He's also a combination fire department, which is very unique in our state and actually in the country. So combination fire departments are kind of a hybrid between the career firefighters and volunteer firefighters. So this is just like a snapshot of like a third party disinterested, you know what I mean, uninterested or but informed person with the firefighter, with firefighter departments. And so we're just kind of looking forward to hearing this, because it's been COVID kind of stretched things out and might have been done earlier if we didn't have a global pandemic. But I just would like to thank Floyd Wise for coming here and just presenting the report.
So before Mr. Wise presents the report, Chief Sawyer, would you like to share anything in reference to it before we hear the report? Because I see that you're here with us. Okay, Chief Sawyer, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Yeah, it's possible that he's having some technical difficulties. I would point out this process was started prior to his arrival, so he may not have much background to provide. I think we're eager to hear from Mr. Weiss.
Right. I agree that we are. We had heard from our volunteer fire companies, firehouses, and they had expressed concern because their interview with Mr. Wise never got completed. They never made it through their entire agenda. So they expressed concerns to council about this report having never been finished on their side of the equation. So I think, so I just needed to put that out there. Yes, Mayor Keffer.
No, I would just say that's, I guess it's fine to throw something out there like that without, that's one side, but you know what I mean? Again, not with the he said, she said stuff. This is just a report. It's not a policy program. It's not a list of things that we need to do. It's just an overview of the way our department functions. And that's it. It's not binding. It does not require councilmatic action. It's a report.
Councilman Wagner.
Yeah, I'd like to underline the reference that you just made, Council President Wentz. We did all receive a communication from the volunteer chiefs, and they're very concerned, obviously, that they were not able to complete their discussion with Mr. Wise, and they have asked that this report be tabled until they are able to do so. I think that's reasonable, and I'm hereby move to table this report until that time.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, gotta grab my tracking pages.
Hello, this is Chief Sawyer.
Chief Sawyer, there you are.
Yes.
Chief Sawyer, so we just have a motion on the table to postpone the reading of this presentation until the volunteer fire chiefs have a chance to finish their interview with Mr. Wise.
That's not going to be possible. That's not going to be possible.
It's not possible?
No. So the volunteers had an opportunity to talk to Weiss. They didn't do it. And now his boss has closed the opportunity. So the presentation is the report is the report. When he spoke to the volunteers, they were combative and hostile. And he tried to get in touch with them again. Okay, you can say it's not true if you want to. But if you
I
talk to
didn't say
Mr.
it wasn't
Wise,
true, sir. I said it's not fair.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I apologize. But Mr. Wise tried to talk to those people. They were combative, wasn't agreeable. And we asked to try to give them another opportunity. And his boss said that because of the time frame that she had to conclude the report. So the report was being worked on for probably at least 6 months. So there was plenty opportunity for those conversations to happen. So what I would recommend is to talk to Mr. Wise to get his side of the story. And again, the report, the opportunity to actually have more input is great.
So you feel comfortable with hearing the report and then we assess whatever got missed in the interview process, we can assess it later? Is that?
Absolutely. It's,
Okay.
it's just a report and the presentation. So in the report that you have, it's up to the administration to decide which parts of the report they want to participate and don't want to participate. So the report is the report. If there's sections of the report that you don't agree on, it's not like you're forced to use those sections of the report. So postponing the report is not going to change it by any means. If you postpone it to next month or next year, it's going to be the same report.
Okay.
Madam President, we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded.
Yes, no, I realized I was just wanted to get a little background because we were missing background on it. So, and that's why I asked for Chief Sawyer's opinion on it. So Councilman Barnett, you wanted to weigh in?
I do, thank you. I have had personal conversation today with two of the chiefs among the district chiefs in the volunteer fire department. First of all, I'd like to comment that I don't know how any report can be considered final without considering all constituents, and all the constituents include the volunteers. The volunteers own the fire companies, they own the real estate, they participate in fighting fires on a volunteer basis. They have a hierarchy unto themselves that works in cooperation with the career fire department of Upper Darby Township. They are very much a part of that department. And to suggest that a report has considered all factors without having their input, and I have further comment to say that what I've been advised is that there was an initial meeting with Mr. Weiss, and that meeting was rather convoluted in that it was done via Zoom. There's a background here that is interfering here. Somebody would check their background.
I think Chief Sawyer is at a game right now, so we got some background from him.
All right, I'll continue. And it was told that the transmission frequently broke up during the meeting. They could not have continuity, and that it was agreed among them that a second meeting would take place. In fact, one of the chiefs has actually volunteered to set up the Zoom through his personal Zoom account. That did not happen. Therefore, I have to conclude that being, supposing that is a fact, I believe that it is, that the report cannot be considered thoroughly completed without having the input of that very crucial part of our Upper Darby department, being the volunteers. We must consider, before a report is considered final, we must consider the input of the volunteer fire departments.
Hey,
May I respond?
yes, please, Chief Sawyer.
Thanks, Council President. So what I would say is, you spoke to the volunteers, have you spoken to Floyd Wise? And if you haven't spoken to Floyd Wise, then that's kind of unfair and biased. So I think if you want to get both sides of the story, you have to speak to both parties so that you have a better picture of what happened.
What I'm saying is they have more input to provide, and that input has to be considered. It is crucial to an appropriate conclusion that will be drawn through this report, through the study. And it has to be chronicled in the report itself. So the report cannot be considered final until all of the commentary has been given by the volunteers. That has not happened yet.
Ms. Weaver, you have your hand up. Did you have a concern, something to
Yes,
incorporate?
hi. I just wanted to introduce myself. I represent DCED, the Department of Community and Economic Development. I'm a local government policy specialist there, and I support the emergency services. And I support our peer consultants, Floyd Wise, who is our expert person on this project and who collaborated with all involved, who was willing to cooperate and participate into this study. When we received the letter of intent last year, actually in April, you got put on a list. We do have a lot of requests to have this type of a study done. It is a service that the Governor's Center for Local Government Services provides free of charge. There's no cost to a municipality to have this type of a study done. We have a peer program that we hire experts who then work with the municipality along with the fire departments. But if the people that are to be involved are not participating, collaborating, or providing the data collection that is needed, Floyd could only do the best that he could do with the data that was collected. He has finalized his report. We do have a final report that we want to present to you. If you feel that this report is not complete, you can certainly complete another letter of intent and send that back in to have another study done. But we are done with the study that we were able to complete for Upper Darby Township. We presented it to Mayor Kiefer and to the Chief of Administration. They had many, many questions. They seemed very happy with the report and the recommendations, which should have been distributed to all of you and to anyone else that wanted to review the report. And tonight would be the night that you would have your opportunity to ask whatever questions or concerns you may have. So if you'd like us to continue and share this report with you, we would be happy to do so. If it seemed like you already voted that you're postponing this.
We have not voted on anything.
Oh, okay.
There's a motion on the floor. There's a first and a motion made and seconded, and then there's discussion.
Okay, so I just wanted to, thank you. I just wanted to have the opportunity to introduce myself and share with you about the program and where we're at now. And I think you will find the report very helpful and support your municipality to go in the right direction with your fire companies. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilman Tunis?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that, those words. I'll just say people eloquently said their points. I was wondering, President Wentz, if we can call the question that was on the floor.
Yes, then we have to go through a vote to call the question itself. So call question. Councilman Tunis, would you like to call the question? Do we have a second on the calling of the question?
Second.
Okay, Tunis. Blackwell. Okay, so Tunis, you're a yes.
Yeah.
Ms. Phillips, do you mind doing a roll call on this? Sorry, I took your job. My bad. Or I can rock it out if you're not prepared. I'm ready.
Councilman Tunis,
Yes, to call the question.
Councilwoman Billups is a yes. Councilman Silva,
Yes, to call the question.
he's
I'm
here.
here now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Blackwell,
Yes.
Councilman Gwen,
Yes.
Councilman Burke,
No.
Councilman Siddiq,
Yes.
Councilwoman Faralia,
No.
Councilman Barnett,
No.
Councilman Wagner,
No.
and Council President Wentz.
Yes. Okay, so going back to, sorry, yeah, so,
And 4 noes.
okay, so going back to the motion on to table this presentation, can you do a roll call of this motion?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Councilman Tunis,
No to tabling.
so, I'm sorry, Council President Wentz.
If you vote yes, then you're voting to table the presentation to postpone it to another day. If you vote no, then you're voting not to table it so that you can hear the presentation today.
Okay. No. Councilwoman Phillips is a no. Councilman Silver,
No.
Councilwoman Blackwell,
No.
Councilman Gwen,
Yes.
Councilman Burke,
Yes.
Councilman Siddiq,
No.
Councilwoman Faralia,
Yes.
Councilman Barnett,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
and Council President Wentz.
So I'm caught between,
Yes.
I know, I'm caught between, I would have liked to have had more information prior to this evening. I would like for our volunteer firefighters, I would have liked to have known more about what was going on prior to this evening in reference to this, if there was any way we could have helped. Not saying that we could have, but I would have liked to have known. I would like to hear Mr. Wise's report, but I would like to clarify that by saying that the report is final says that all information had been heard, when even though there was funk in the equation, not necessarily all was heard. So I think that's where we're running into a snag a little bit. And that's why I'm clarifying things before I officially vote on this.
Council President, aren't we just listening to a report? We're not.
We are, but there's a,
Can be prejudicial.
right. If not all the information's there,
It can be presented at a later date.
but it's never
We're
going
not
to
finalizing anything.
It
Madam
can't be
President,
finalized. It's as final as.
discussion among
Are we in
council
a
is
vote?
over.
We're in a voting
I'm sorry. Yes, I know. I felt the need to clarify my vote before I said my vote.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you, President.
Can I clarify my vote, Council President, since you have?
You already voted.
So can I clarify mine?
I clarify. I haven't voted yet.
I know, but I would like to clarify mine due to the fact that Mrs. Morrow said that it was distributed to council and the chiefs, and it wasn't. It was not distributed to us. And that's my vote, no. Mrs. Morrow, you said it was distributed. When was the report finished and why wasn't it distributed to council? Thank you. Thank you.
So my vote is a no, because I'd like to hear the report, but I want to clarify that council did not receive this report prior to today. We haven't seen it. We know nothing.
Thank you, Laura.
Clarify.
Thank you, Laura.
Would you like me to respond to that?
Could we know the final count of that vote, please?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no's
5 yes.
and
And I
5
made,
yes.
and I made the 6 no.
Yes.
All right, so now we're supposed to move on to the presentation, right?
Yes, we are moving on to the
Yes.
presentation.
By one vote.
Wow.
Yes.
Laura, the date of the report, please. Thank you.
So, Mr. Wise, thank you for joining us. Sorry for the controversy before you get to present your presentation. Please, we'd love to hear what you got to say.
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to present my findings. And I do work at a local government level, so I understand the need for some controversy. That's why councils, executive, and legislatures exist. That's the purpose of this, so we find common ground in local government. So thank you very much. I do want to point out that the word prejudicial was used. So I'd like to talk about that word for a second. In terms of my evaluation of your fire analysis, I took into consideration as a combination department that you're made up of a series or a group of career personnel that are employed by your township. But also I was able to make contact with a number of the volunteer departments. We did have a meeting, and I am extremely sensitive to the need for volunteerism in the community. I always honor those people that give up their free time, short of compensation to provide. And through my report, you will see that it outlines several areas that are strictly dedicated to recruitment and retention of the volunteers. In coordination with Chief Sawyer, the one thing that we were very, and we've had several meetings that he can attest to, we were very tuned into was keeping the volunteers in the system and actually integrating more communication with them, trying to integrate them into a standardized system. So in beginning, before I get through my report, I would like to point out that as you read it, I consistently use the term combination. And by that, I mean that the treatment of a career staff member is equivalent to a volunteer staff member. In other words, same policies, same practices, same disciplinary codes, same expectation in emergency response. So I do try to balance the world between volunteerism and career. As a matter of fact, at one time when I had more free time, I was a volunteer as well. So I do understand those issues. The issue that was brought up initially, I'd kind of like to sort of diffuse that. I did have a meeting, in fact, with the volunteers. It was a very productive meeting. It was a very long meeting. And we did, in fact, have some technological issues that evening, but I was able to gather a significant amount of information. I had asked them for input in several areas. I had asked them for individual data, such as training of personnel that I needed to know for each department, the actual number of qualified interior firefighters, as well as their levels of certification. I thought the volunteer departments could best be suited to provide that for me. Obviously, the career aspect, the career side of it, they provided that data to me from their staffing reports. There was no additional contact, and I did send several emails out to the volunteer group afterwards, asking for those, reminding them that I need that information. And at no time since that first meeting, which I don't exactly have the date, I could probably go back in my email and find when I set that date, have I received no contact, no phone calls, or any email or concerns from any of the volunteer contingents. And they all have my email, and they were all given my cell phone. So I am always open in consideration of anybody that has input to my studies. So whether you were in the career staff, matter of fact, I met with several layers of the career staff, and I examined input from the volunteers because, again, quite frankly, I don't live in Upper Darby, and I want to know all of the details of what's occurring in your community to make a assessment of the situation. So I do understand there probably is some concern, although I would ask the volunteer agencies what that concern is, in that we are not removing any of their authority. They will still be in existence. They will still be part of the department. They will still be responding. They will still be funded. There's very, very little change to their environment. As a matter of fact, my report actually seeks to improve the training and connection between them and the elected officials. So, any further questions from anybody as we move into the report a little bit? Look at some of the, I only have about, yes, Mr. Gwynn, go ahead.
Go ahead, Councilman Gwynn, you gotta unmute yourself.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I got. Good night, honey. Good night. I love you. Go to sleep. Good night. Hold on. Got the kids. Sorry. Good night, buddy. Okay, go to bed. I love you, pal. Go to bed. I'm sorry,
Bye,
buddy.
little ones.
That's the best part of the night.
You know how, listen, you know how it is, man. The kids, you guys be good. Listen to mom. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Gwynn. I'm sorry.
I apologize, but I was wondering if there is any written copy of the report that would be, or electronically distributed to council so that we have it, or is it all verbal?
No. The report was generated and released to, there is a physical report in the hands of, I would assume Mayor Kepper. The executive branch has it. We released that. So I don't know how they publish that, what chain of command, but it's available. I have it. I'm looking at it now, a copy of it on my computer. Yes, Mr. Is it Bonnet?
Wait, sir. Can you just, is it possible to just email it to UD Council Laura Wentz at rcn.com? And then I can distribute it to all of my people.
I see Miss Mara moving. I believe she's going to handle that right now.
Can you tell me that again? The email?
Yep. UD Council Laura Wentz, WENTZ at rcn.com.
Okay, I'll send it right now.
Great. I'll forward it to my peeps.
Thank you.
Councilman, is it Bonnet?
Councilman Bonnet.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Wise.
No problem.
Mr. Wise, when was that report issued?
When was it completed?
When was it issued?
Completed.
In other words, sent to you. Hold on 1 second. I will tell you it was completed. Let me look at my screen here. This was closed out officially March 2nd of 2021.
Is that when it was submitted to the township?
No, we had our meeting with the township on the 12th
12th of what?
of March.
Okay, is that when it was submitted to the township?
Yes.
12th of
And
March,
then
thank you.
we just get it tonight?
2 months.
Well, what I was asked to send was the presentation that Floyd is going to present to you. Because when I sent the report, I had asked Vincent to distribute that to the mayor and to council and anyone else that would need the actual report.
So,
But I will send it right now for you.
so-
Did
so-
anybody else from council receive that?
No.
By
So it's over 2 months ago that this report was submitted.
Okay. Mr. Wise, you can please continue your report.
Okay, so I'm going to screen share a short PowerPoint. Again, I'm only going to be able to give you a brief overview. Now that you have, or you will be receiving a copy of the report, by all means, you can really dig into the details. There's a lot of information I'm not able to get into. This would be an 8-hour presentation. Again, I have almost a year invested in this. And looking at a bunch of different structural issues within your department and areas for improvement. So let me bring up the PowerPoint. And everyone should be seeing, everyone's seeing the Upper Darby, Delaware County presentation study. Okay, very well. And we will move through. So in the report itself, I have an executive summary. The things that we examined overall was the analysis of total operations. This was a very in-depth study. Many of our studies that we are asked to perform maybe look at small details, apparatus purchasing, facilities. In your case, we have a system of volunteers and career. So I had to look at things from a labor management standpoint, costing, finances. We had to look at some actual organizational chart issues, organization, how the reporting systems, how the volunteers function with the career staff. Interestingly enough, one of the areas that was, I would say, unusual, uncommon compared to most fire departments was that you had a career staff that works Monday through Friday, and then your weekend is supplemented 100% by the volunteers. That is in my exposure in the fire service of 28 years, this is the only department that I know of that functions under that system. Like my department, obviously, we are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but we are a combination as well. So that was something I had to kind of work through and understand how that affects the response. We had to look at equipment, facilities, the actual firehouses themselves, what the capital investments need to be, and then some other recommendations that affect fire service operations, such as training. And we'll look at each of these. I believe there were 8 major areas of improvement that we looked at. Your ISO rating system was examined. I do a quick look of your insurance service office review, which was done last in July 28th of 2014. You're currently certified, if you're unaware, as a 3.3x, which is that rating goes from 1 to 10. So 3.3x in a community of your size is very, very good. Believe it or not, with a small investment of some of the changes in this plan, I think it's extremely feasible that you could be an ISO rating of 2x. So you can improve by 1 number. The question there is, most people would say, well, what does that mean? I don't understand what the insurance service office is. What you would see across the entire community is a reduction in your insurance rates for all of your commercial businesses and potentially reduction for your residential insurance. And the reason being is because you're evaluated as having a more effective fire service. And the ISO explanation is within the document. So I don't want to go too far in detail because I could spend an hour just talking about ISO. But your insurance service office rating is one measurement, one standard measurement nationally that's adopted when we do evaluations on fire service deployment models. So you'll see ISO as a common measurement tool. Recommendation number 1 was to develop an actual standard of cover document. The question is, what is a standard of cover? That is a comprehensive analysis of your fire department in terms of looking at what are the risks in the community, what are the hazards in the community, and what are the values or how frequent are those issues in the community. And this is not just fires. This could be emergency medical service calls. It could be natural disasters. It could be fires. It could be almost anything. And then we have to look at, in our standard of cover, the deployment. How many firehouses, where are they placed? What are our turnout of manpower on our apparatus? How many apparatus are staffed? What is our turnout times? So it's a very, very complex document. Standard of cover documents, if you take a look at how they're designed, and Chief Sawyer can provide a great deal of background on this, which is it's basically a strategic planning document. This could take up to a year to get through thoroughly. The accreditation, International Accreditation Fire Council can assist with this process. They have a lot of documentation available to work through the standard of cover studies. And what we determined was when we look at NFPA 1710, 1720, so 1710 is our deployment for staffing. In other words, how many personnel to protect a community of different risk levels. And one of the things that was really telling in the plan was our number of personnel that we bring to a scene on a Monday through Friday versus the weekend. In discussion, it was documented through data and advised to me that on weekends, the number of responding personnel was less under volunteer coverage. And there was some questionality also in terms of qualification of members to function in the department on weekends versus during the week with the career staff. And so one of my concerns was consistency. And I would ask all of you in council, I'm assuming all of your constituents, if they had a fire on a Monday, would prefer the same level of care and the same expedience of care as they would on a Monday or a Saturday. So with that being said, we have to develop a consistent model. We want the same response 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless if it's career, volunteer, or a combination mixed staff. We have to approach this with standardization. During the day, during the week, I understood that your staffing is 4 on 4 pieces of apparatus, which is a 16-man minimum. I provided an evaluation in the report of some staffing change coverages. My strong recommendation for the standard of cover was to find a shift rotation that would allow your career staff to be in service Monday through Sunday. In other words, all 7 days of the week. That is not to remove the volunteers from responding. Our goal is for the volunteer to be supplementary and to ride along with the career staff with equivalent training to the same fires. They're part of the same fire department. So I strongly recommend looking at development of the 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day staffing model. And then I provided a matrix in the report with a 21-man count, a 19-man count, and a 16-man count, which is what you currently have as a 16-man minimum. I also provided in there just a rough estimate on some of the costing that might be involved when you take a look at, because I do understand budget analysis and financial analysis. You know, it's a tough time to put additional financial strain on budgets of most communities, particularly after COVID. So I am sensitive to the fact is that I'm sure Upper Darby does not have an unlimited budget. So I'll keep that in mind. Again, that is probably recommendation number one, was probably where I spent the majority of my time in the study. So it's one of the longer portions of it. Number two was looking at restructuring of chain of command. So if you take a look at how it's laid out, we have Chief Sawyer in the lead of the organization under the department's administration. He is responsible for all fire service and rescue operations. That is contingent of the career and volunteer staff as the single point responsibility. Under him, I strongly recommend the development of an assistant chief's position. Currently, he is by himself in a management role. So if he wanted to take, let's just say, a vacation day, there would be no one that could fulfill his position as an assistant to be responsible in running the day-to-day operations. Very uncommon. Most departments, particularly of your size and your population, would probably have a chief and at least two assistants. What I'm recommending for now is development of one management level assistant chief's position with the appropriate authority to function under Chief Sawyer and support some of his planning operations day to day. The other area that I'm looking at or that I've proposed is you currently have 4 deputy chiefs positions. 3 of the deputy chiefs are commonly referred to as operations chiefs. So they run the township-wide rescue and fire EMS operations day to day over the 3 shifts. And your other deputy chief that you currently have would get moved into a position of managing fire prevention and education. So normally when we look at fire service management, everyone's concerned about the red fire truck and the firehouse. And that's a very, very important part of what we do, particularly to those that are dialing 911. However, another very, very important need of our service is for the prevention side. So inspections and education, as well as fire investigation. And normally they will live under their separate own division that would be headed by another deputy. So that would be somewhat, not necessarily an expansion. You sort of have that now. It would just be refining those positions a little bit. Under the volunteer fire officers, numbers and integration. So I did make one change in that. And again, this is a recommendation that would have to be adopted in conjunction with the volunteer departments. I do believe strongly, and this is one element I will reinforce, that the fire chief of each individual volunteer fire department, of which there should be 5, I believe they're called district chiefs. I believe that is a very valuable asset to Chief Sawyer in terms of running the operations within each of their departments. So the 5 district chiefs would remain as district chiefs, and they would be considered part of the command staff operations of the department. In other words, when a staff meeting occurs, Chief Sawyer would have a staff meeting with his deputy chiefs. Most likely those volunteer district chiefs would be included in that staff meeting in terms of planning, budget preparation, training needs, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to find a better method of communicating and alignment between each of the 5 volunteer departments, and integrating them in Chief Sawyer's staff meetings would be ideal. So now under that, each of the volunteer departments had numerous assistant chiefs. In some of the departments, looking at total numbers, it almost looked like there were more fire officers than there were firefighters. So I do recommend reduction in total number of fire officers, keeping lieutenants and captains within the volunteer departments, because typically they're company officers and company officers work within the companies. but there would be one district chief for each of the departments. Again, that's all outlined in the report. Number 3 would be standard operating procedures and work rules. This was an area that when I researched, there were some distinct vacancies of work rules and policies that needed to be edited and updated that I was given. This was prior to Chief Sawyer taking control. So I would assume Chief Sawyer probably has been busy crafting policy and updating policy. When I started the report, it was noted from the prior fire administration that there were some things that had not been created. And some of those items I listed in the report are high liability items for Upper Darby Township that need to be in place. And again, these agreements would be equivalent for the career staff as well as the volunteer staff. There would be no second rules for the volunteers. There would be a standardized response method 24/7 and standardized human resource practices. If a career staff member violates, let's say a hostile work environment. If a career staff member creates a hostile work environment, the disciplinary reaction of the administration should be equivalent to if a volunteer creates a hostile work environment. Again, as you can see, combination, I consider them equivalent on the same tier, and therefore rules have to be standardized. Recommendation number 4 would be adoption of a capital improvement budget. So this was an area in discussing with, this was actually, a lot of this information came out of my meeting with the volunteers that I had when they met me for my Zoom. They filled me in on some investment needs for the firehouses. Obviously, your firehouses, several of them are aged. They outlined some pretty significant structural problems, roof issues, mildew, needs for growth and development of the facilities. Understanding that the facilities themselves are licensed and owned by the volunteers. However, my plan is supportive of funding the facility infrastructure because they are saving the township significant amounts of money in terms of not having to build firehouses. A built firehouse could be $10 to $12 million in today's construction costs. So I think that in my plan, I have an outline of a few items that we need to find some capital funds over the next 5 years and provide that to the volunteer departments to help them, basically renovate their facilities that you're using. I also talked about your fleet. Your fleet, because of lack of purchasing, has become somewhat obsolete and dated. That was pretty evident, and I've done a pretty good job of outlining in the first few pages some of the units that are at their end of their usable lifespan, and many of them are. I included several purchasing options within the report to try to, as well as outlining a purchasing plan. Chief Sawyer and I spent some time discussing this. Actually, we had quite a lengthy discussion on this because of trying to expedite the process and bring your fleet up to safe and modern day standards under the National Fire Protection Association. And I believe strongly that leasing may be an option for your agency. The reason being is, so obviously you're a very busy department and you have a massive population. I was extremely sensitive to the size that you're protecting as well as your building stock. Your fire apparatus are being used very hard. They're being driven very hard. Because of that, they need to have a shorter replacement cycle than many of your surrounding communities, except for Philadelphia, that may not be as busy. Your environment, your fire service environment, is identical to that faced by the city of Philadelphia in terms of call response and types of buildings. So you should probably examine their turnover rate and try to craft something relatively close. With that being said, leasing might be an option in terms of owning a piece for 5 to 7 years and then turning the lease over and then leasing something else. It turfs some of the cost and it spreads out and lowers some of the apparatus costs, particularly when we're looking at you having to purchase probably at best 2 new pieces of apparatus over each year over the next 4 years to actually expedite the purchasing process. So again, some of that finance is included, maybe some target goals of what would be included in costing, so that you as a council, along with the administration, can begin to look ahead and see what funding options exist. Because again, I know your budget is not infinite. Recommendation number 5 is development of a detailed training plan. So one of the areas that you suffered somewhat was in your ISO training analysis in terms of minimal training requirements. So when ISO looks at your staffing and training, they look at all staff. So they look at training investments of the career staff as well as the volunteers. There was some pushback and some inability to provide me with some of the training documentation, which is what I wanted to see. Today, I cannot tell you for each volunteer fire department how many trained and qualified volunteers are available in each department. I could tell you how many career staff you have. I could tell you the level of training of those career staff. I was provided with those documents, but I was not provided with a matrix of each individual in each volunteer department and their level of licensure or accreditation. So I cannot tell you in total, you have X number of firefighters. Part of my recommendation plan is that you move forward with an audit analysis of your training and determine the needs of the volunteers. How many do you have that are truly trained, qualified as interior firefighters? And those that are not, are they riding apparatus? And if they are, that's a huge liability. If they are not, what do we need to do to get them trained to be a provider for the township? Again, I did not have as much of an issue in analyzing the career staff as I did with the volunteer staff. As a matter of fact, that was one of the areas that I had asked them. I'd sent 3 separate emails asking them to please include that documentation, and I have never received any follow-up calls or emails on that. Everyone is available, or my contact number has been available since I began this report. So again, my plan will talk about the types of training requirement for firefighters, for lieutenants, for captains, for drivers, for special operations, and what's the expectation on an annual basis for a firefighter to be considered trained and prepared. So, and that's an area that I strongly feel training is an area that must be developed. That is workforce development, and that is the quality of the response that the public gets, which is our end goal. Recommendation number 6, give me 1 second while I get a sip of water, because I'm going really fast. So my recommendation number 6 is that we fund and expand the Division of Prevention, Education, Investigation, and Special Operations. In other words, it's basically some growth and reinforcement of services that have been provided. Currently, your department is beginning to expand inspection processes. I know currently you're doing apartments, and now I believe you're doing commercial properties. That is to be commended. I work for a department, my city, that has basically 0 inspection footprint. My firefighters do not, at any time, get into any building for inspections that we are responsible for. And in my levels of education, working on a master's degree and as a chief officer, as a certified chief officer through the national levels, that's a failure. That's a failure, quite frankly. Your department's being very proactive in that. Chief Sawyer understands the need to reinforce that. I gave a quick list here of some of the things that in developing that prevention, education, investigation division, we would look at inspections, closer inspections, which allows us a better control of safety issues. There is a direct impact of inspections and education to reduction of fires in a community. Communities that integrate these levels, these divisions of labor, see lower annual dollar loss values from fires. So from a community standpoint, this is something that must exist in the fire department. And so I believe that, funding, come time when budget time comes and, obviously legislatively, you get a chance to look at line items. Please try to support a line item increase for inspections, prevention, and investigations. Recommendation number 7 is the volunteer recruitment and diversity. So I was sympathetic to the volunteer cause. I am consistently sympathetic to those that want to give for the community. I honestly believe that we need to do more to recruit in our communities. We need to do more to show value for our volunteers. And in my report, you will see several areas that we can provide a return on investment of our volunteers. I outlined a few things such as length of service pension programs that could be integrated if that's not currently in place, which I don't believe it is, as well as support of education and training, and several other areas. There's a push statewide for tax reduction for our volunteer firefighters in terms of property tax reduction, since they aren't necessarily being compensated. In your situation, you are not able to physically compensate with money your volunteer staff, because that would be an unfair labor practice because you're working under labor contract. So I would be very careful not to cause a grievance with there's different methods of non-compensation that can occur for the volunteer members, but we still want to give them a value for their time away from their family. So where do we attract these volunteers? My report puts in several areas where the department should push and advertise for volunteerism. And more than that, and this was an area that Chief Sawyer and I had a lengthy conversation on. I actually pointed out to him as an African-American fire chief, the first African-American fire chief, you do not have a single member of your department that is female and or minority. That's a problem. It's a problem in my department as well. We are predominantly a Caucasian male organization. And some of that is we are not necessarily getting the word out and advertising to all community groups. So there is a lengthy segment of my report that talks about strategy for increasing diversification. We do not necessarily, and I say this openly, we do not want the best white firefighters. We do not want the best African-American firefighters. We don't want the best male. We don't want the best female. We want the best persons, any color, any sex. We want the best persons that can pass our standardized testing and become part of the Upper Darby combination fire department. That includes our diversity initiatives also look at employment as well, not just volunteerism, but employment. Obviously the fire department is a fantastic job, fantastic benefits, and we want to open that up to our community in terms of keeping some of that income in our neighborhoods and obviously integrating the people that care about their neighborhoods, right? We want to speak to them. So that was an area that I really invested some time on. Currently in my department, I'm working on a task force for diversification and getting the word out of job availabilities. Number 8, develop our township relationships with the volunteer agencies. I would caution, this was one area that I had some concern. So I was educated by both the volunteers and career staff that there is an exchange of a vast amount of money on a monthly basis that pays for the volunteers to staff the firehouses on the weekend. A couple things were exposed in this process. The weekend staffing levels were not consistent as they were promised under the compensation agreement, and the amount of money being invested, there was some questionality on whether the money was being targeted or going to where it was supposed to go. It is not to call out any level of corruption. I'm not indicating there's corruption. What I'm indicating is that if the township is going to spend, and I believe the number was $130,000 a month, that we should probably audit that and be very, very cognizant of exactly where that money is going in terms of receipts. The other item I would say is if we move our career staff to weekend staffing, the movement, which obviously incurs additional payroll costs, that's part of my budget analysis. Then the compensation for the volunteers on the weekends now becomes illegal because that would be an unfair labor practice. So that money could be tailored, that $130,000 a month could be tailored to different things, supporting training for the volunteers, supporting infrastructure improvements for the volunteer departments, supporting apparatus purchasing, supporting recruitment retention. So maybe that money could be better spent from the coffer to do better things. And with that, the auditing and the cost controls to make sure the money is going exactly where you want it to go, particularly at $130,000 times 12 months, that's well over $1 million a year. And, fiscal transparency is a keystone of good local government. That are my 8 recommendations in a nutshell. There is a tremendous amount more information in the reports. As you read it, I will warn you, I probably do not write in the most exciting fashion. So if you're looking this to be a novel, it probably will not be. There is a lot of technical jargon. If you see technical things, you don't necessarily understand what that is. If you reach out to Chief Sawyer, I'm sure he can better detail what those needs are. And if there's any follow-up, if you contact Miss Morrow or Miss Clay, I don't believe I'm going anywhere. Hopefully after this evening, I keep my job. And I am certainly willing to continue to support Upper Darby. I believe, and I do want to say, and this may come to a surprise to some, I found, first of all, Chief Sawyer was extremely helpful. He was extremely cooperative in the process. The career staff were extremely cooperative, sharing with me both positive and negative. And I actually found that the majority of my response to most of the volunteers was favorable. I did receive, honestly, a little bit of pushback from one agency. And I explained to them that the priority of all the organizations, it's not about ego. It's not about your organization doing something different. It's about all the organizations functioning together for the betterment of the citizens of Upper Darby. That's the end goal. That's it. I would ask if anybody has any questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything you may have.
Can you unshare your screen
Yep.
for a moment so we can see our crew?
I will unshare right now. There we go.
Okay, so Councilman Burke, I see your hand first, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Wise, or is it Chief Wise? I'd like to address you correctly.
You actually, you can call me Floyd. That's not a problem. Normally I'm Chief Wise. Floyd's fine.
Okay.
I'm a simple.
All right, thanks, Floyd. Few questions.
Yes, sir.
On number 7, I don't know how far you got into your report, but we are diversified at Highland Park.
Okay.
So I find a little problem with saying that we don't have an African-American volunteer. We do.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so that's one glitch. All the volunteer houses did not send their training information, or just 1 or 2 didn't send their training information? You said all of them.
I believe I may have received 1 firehouse that turned in some training information. 1.
So you've received Cardington, sir. Is that correct?
Hey.
What number is that? I'm sorry. Cardington is station.
You're probably in council.
Okay, thank you. If they're not trained and they're not allowed to be on the fire truck, that basically wipes out the junior program, which would give your retention and your recruitment to the volunteer. So how do we handle that with the recruitment when we can't have junior firefighters going to the firehouses or on the truck?
Well, I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to speak about the junior program, because I have my own feelings about that within the state. I would ask the question: do you necessarily want to push 14-year-old members out to emergency scenes?
No, sir.
Really? No. Okay.
No. 16, 17 guys that are looking for an entry-level job at 17 as a junior in high school, just like going into a trade, sir. Which would be still considered junior firefighters.
Yeah,
so,
certainly. And I would think
as
that
an age group,
they certainly have the opportunity to continue to train in the firehouse and mentor with those individuals. And when their time comes at 18, with the appropriate training, by all means, we put them on the fire truck and they go to work. I
absolutely
do understand that program.
Yeah, or go right into the academy, sir. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, actually, you bring up an interesting point, Mr. Burke, in terms of civil service practices. You, as a body, as well as the administration, have the right to sway and have some control on civil service. Just wanted to point one thing out that I did not put in the report, something you may want to look into. Washington, D.C. does a fantastic job. They have a cadet program. It's like a junior firefighter, sort of. When the cadet reaches the age of, I believe it's 19, I think that's DC's minimum hiring age. When they take the civil service exam for the city of DC, they receive, I'm off the top of my head, it might be like +5 points in the exam. So it gives a community member an opportunity, number 1, get training. Number 2, a little bit of an advantage in the hiring process because they're pre-trained And they're obviously, in this case, they're engaged with the city of DC. So that might be something, again, that the body can look into.
Yes, we just lowered our age requirement on the civil service. So
What did that lower to, just out of curiosity?
18.
Oh, very good. Good.
So, as an entry-level job going into the academy, coming out of the academy, serving 3 or 4 years to get to the high rate. So
it would absolutely be wonderful for the Upper Darby volunteers to study and test and then move over to the career rank because they already know the community.
That's correct. And I hope to see that through the report as we go through the 57 pages. Seem positive the way you were speaking. My last question would be, how would the township dictate to the officers within the volunteer company when they really don't have the authority of that firehouse? I don't think the township would have the authority under Chief Sawyer, I believe, his recommendations, but not so clear about how many officers would be able to dictate that. So,
are you speaking about how many line officers in the organization?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think when you look at the organization itself, obviously they're probably set by bylaws, and bylaws have to be voted on and ratified internally. I don't believe I think you are somewhat correct, and it can be mandated, but I believe that Chief Sawyer maybe in coordination, communication, as a relationship is built. Here's what I will say. The volunteers echoed to me that in the past, there was not a very good working relationship between the volunteer community agencies and the administration. Chief Sawyer is very aware and wants to invest more time trying to repair that. And again, I can't speak on the details because I don't necessarily know what happened in the past, but that was exposed and hopefully can be repaired.
And I believe Chief Sawyer is a lot different, and I believe that hopefully he's working towards what you just said, Floyd. So
absolutely.
I appreciate your time, your presentation, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Councilman Burke. Appreciate that. Anyone else?
Councilman Silva? Wagner, I see your hand. Go ahead,
Yes,
Silva.
thank you. Mr. Wise, so to your suggestion that we move to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week model for staffing with career firefighters, under our, would we need to increase the number of firefighters in order to do that?
So are you talking about increasing total number of firefighters or total number on duty?
Total number of career firefighters in order to...
As it is right now, just in rough calculation, I think it may require hiring of 5 to 6 more to balance out the numbers just to carry over. The issue comes down to how you want to subdivide based on number of shifts, which I included in the report. So currently there's 3 rotating shifts, an A, B, and C. Some departments out there to look at cost may develop a 4th shift. So in my case, my department operates on a 4-shift system. A 3-shift system will work on a different hourly schedule than a 4-shift system because of FLSA requirements. So I outlined all those details in there. And so that decision at the administrative level in terms of budget finance would have to be examined because, again, there is a payroll cost. And I did do a rough calculation, I think, in there on the additional, you're looking at staffing for an additional 48 hours on the weekend. So Saturday, Sunday, which your day should be covering. And then I did a rough calculation on hourly costing of a person, and then what that would mean annually. I believe I put in there, but that would be easy to generate that. But it would you probably look at 5 to 6 more in terms of total staff to cover that. The issue comes in there with there's other little caveats like what we call a Kelly day. We have to take into account things like sick leave, vacations, overtime, things like that. That's all got to be estimated when you lay out this new shift rotation schedule. And the other odd thing is your deputy chiefs. So your deputy chiefs that are career are currently already working on the 7-day-a-week schedule. So they come in weekends anyway. So now it would just be the other career staff would be on the same rotation with their deputy chiefs. Did that help answer the question?
It does. So currently now, I mean, if you could just sort of explain it to me, it's like the career firefighters, they work just Monday through Friday. And
Correct.
are they 24 hours for Monday through Friday?
Yeah, that's
or-
correct. So Monday through Friday, whatever time you call, you're going to receive the minimum, which I believe is 16 firefighters and 1 command officer on duty. So if you had a fire, I mean, obviously you would get supplemented volunteers hopefully as well. And that's the goal. So many times volunteers see this as a threat. And I do understand where some of the concern is, those of you, the volunteers calling you, because they believe, hey, we're never going to be on a fire truck. Well, here's the issue. Number one, they can ride every fire truck. If they're qualified, they can come in and get on a fire truck with the career staff if they're at the same equivalent level. Beyond that, oftentimes you need a second fire truck to respond. And most of your firehouses have second pieces. So if the career staff push out the first and the fire's big enough, there's more than enough work for the volunteers to staff that second piece and come to the scene. And if they work in a standardized practice, it would be no different than adding more career staff on scene.
Okay, but they would just be purely supplemental at that point.
Yeah,
They're not.
the numbers would be supplemental. And when you say that, oftentimes the volunteers see that as a slight, and it is not a slight. They are still, if they were in the firehouse, if they come in to ride, or they're going to come in the firehouse, they can staff a piece. They could put an extra engine in service. They could be like, hey, we're going to put engine 4 in service. Nothing keeps them. Again, I really want to push this plan as treating our career and volunteer as equivalent people. They're the same. They're doing the same service. With that, the same service requires the same training, the same preparation, the same responsibility.
I mean, I guess from like an actuarial standpoint, I mean, is there any reduction in calls on the weekend versus during the week? And I would think in some ways it would almost be more likely that calls would occur on a weekend.
Yeah,
than-
the problem is, and so what you bring up is a common, I'll say a common argument. They'll say, well, since there's less calls on the weekend, we need less firefighters. So it's the ICMA poses this argument very frequently. And I had a conversation in a webinar with an ICMA manager, and I said, well, so if we have less calls on the weekend, does that also guarantee less fires on the weekend? And if you have a fire on the weekend and you've determined that you've reduced staffing, such as New York City did in Bronx and Harlem in the 1980s, then what you experience are fires that rage out of control. So we can't necessarily measure staffing based on the call volume because we don't know when that fire is going to occur.
Oh, okay. And then if you have less staff and there is a fire on the weekend, then you would have a greater casualty because of that.
Potentially, the fire could go uncontrolled. And some of those standards, the standards, I have a good explanation in there of what drives a standard, what I call a standard response package. That's defined within my report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wise. I appreciate it.
No problem, Mr. Silva. Thank you very much. Good
Thank
question.
you. Next up, we have Councilman Wagner and Councilman Bonnet. You're after Councilman Wagner. So go ahead, Councilman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Thank you so much for giving us your time tonight.
No problem.
Are you familiar with a term called Gold Star Department? Do you know what that means?
I have not heard of that term.
You have not heard of it? Okay.
No, I have not heard of that.
Does the Pennsylvania Fire Commissioner issue designations or?
Yeah, there are participating organizations throughout that work at either 100%, 75% certified, that type of thing.
Do you know if Upper Darby is such a participating organization and where they stand?
I do not know that.
Okay. You said to us as well that fiscal transparency, I wrote this down, fiscal transparency is a keynote of local government.
Mhm.
That's something that's important to you and that obviously makes a lot of sense, correct?
Yes, correct.
You submitted this report to Upper Darby Township March 12 of this year?
That's correct.
If I understood your comments and Ms. Morrow's comments, that was with the intention that it was going to be distributed to the elected officials of the township then, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why we manufacture it. It gets branded as the Commonwealth, and it gets sent out to be shared across. So this presentation is like our final. It's our final chapter of saying, here's the plan, presentation, please implement or use.
And you've told us, obviously, there's a great deal more detail in your report than you were able to submit verbally tonight, right?
Yeah, I can't keep you on till 4 in the morning.
Are you, yeah, and I appreciate that. Are you aware of any reason why it was not submitted to us until literally tonight during your presentation?
No, I can't provide any background on that.
Finally, if the recommendations in your report were implemented, have you done any kind of analysis about what that would cost?
Yeah, I think your total costing. I don't have a total cost worked out, but all of the different elements in there provide some target costs. So when you go through for the apparatus, each of the apparatus I listed in a replacement, I have a target expectation cost roughly of what that may cost, as well as some of your apparatus has some resale value. Now, albeit it might be some small resale value, but I have an estimated resale value based on depreciation. Unfortunately, because some of it's so aged, it's really depreciated down to, I would say, pennies on a dollar. But there are some estimated costs in there. The staffing also has some estimated costs so that you could plan ahead. You know, if we're going to integrate all of my plan, each recommendation is listed as a short-term, a medium-term, or a long-term strategic planning goal. So the short-term ones obviously are simple. The policy analysis, that's short-term. We can begin to develop better policy this year. The medium-term, I believe, is 1 to 3. The strategic stuff, large facility improvements, that could take 5 years, architect planning, that type of thing. So all of those are kind of ranked in terms of the magnitude of how serious that project is.
So you just said a lot in answer to my question, but you didn't tell us what the cost was. What is the total? Do you know that?
I cannot give you, I don't have a calculated total of everything in the plan. In other words, you want me to say the whole plan is $11 million? I cannot give you that.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your time, sir.
Mr. Wagner, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Barnett.
Thank you, President Wentz. Mr. Weiss, you had indicated in your presentation that one of your recommendations is for the township to hire an assistant chief.
That's correct.
Assistant to Chief Sawyer.
That's correct.
To fill perhaps complete administrative duties in the absence of Chief Sawyer, which it's only understandable that the chief would be away on personal leave at various times. And I do see the logic of having someone in command to replace him temporarily. However, that could be a very expensive cost to the township to add that staff person. I'm sure that's a high salary position to have someone qualified to do that.
Yep.
We have 4 deputy chiefs, as you properly captioned in your report. Is it probable that one of them, in the absence of Chief Sawyer, could function in that capacity?
I think that structurally, the deputy chiefs are obviously represented by labor. So I think that there might be some conflict of interest in terms of having them involved at the mayoral administration level.
But that's only for a temporary period of time.
The deputy chiefs would then operate under him. One of them would always be operating under him. I believe there is plenty of work given the size of your department, the services provided, the size of the community. I believe that if you look apples to apples, your department should at least, national standard, should probably have at least one assistant chief to provide support and share some of the workload with Chief Sawyer fairly. And I do understand that is a high salary position if you are going to hire someone with the necessary skills and education to make it attractive for a candidate to get that person. So yeah, you do point out, Mr. Bonet, you are correct in that.
Okay, thank you. The net effect of if all or many of your recommendations, even if not all of them were implemented, that would be a very expensive, a great deal of expense to the township. And I'm sure some of that can be capitalized like you had suggested. Is it probable that there are grants available to cover some of these costs?
Yeah, actually, that is an area that, you bring up a great point. In terms of creative finance, you obviously have limit tax base, limited revenue sources. You need to, and I do not know administratively if there's a grant writer in place in the administrative office, but AFG grants, FP&S grants, state fire academy grants are all available that can supplement and pay for some of these items. Bonding. There's several other areas. There's a fantastic document that we can provide, or I can provide for you, in terms of funding solutions for volunteer agencies, provide some out-of-the-box financial revenue generating methods that are helpful. So yeah, I believe that it is worth investing the time. Just as a FYI, if you do not have a grants manager, there are third-party companies available that are extremely successful. They can be contracted to write your grant wording, because everything's based on wording of what whatever your target project is. There are companies that will write that grant, and usually they'll cost you 1 to 2 to 3% of the grant fund for them to write it, construct it, and they have like a 90% success rate in getting grant funding for communities that don't necessarily have a professional grant writer.
Do they normally work on a contingency basis, or they work on a fee-for-service basis?
It's a fee-for-service, and you will basically contract them for a specific grant. So let's say next year Upper Darby wanted to pursue an AFG grant, then you would contract with them to pursue that single AFG grant, and they would walk you through the process. So they would look at all, like whatever your goal is, they would look at all the details required. They would write it, word it, present it, because it has to be presented much like this. And then they would help you on the backside, because most of these grants are audited. So you have to show at the completion of the cycle of the grant, what was purchased, the receipts, that it was completed, so that you're eligible for additional grants. And they walk you through that whole process.
Thank you. Are you in a position to provide a list of probable grants, probably available grants, and also names of these consulting firms or companies that could assist in achieving grants by writing the grant?
Mr. Bonet, if you contact Ms. Morrow, or if the administration does, I absolutely can assist in making that list and help and direct you to some alternative funding mechanisms.
Well, certainly, I think
I just want to reinforce everybody. I am aware, as most municipalities, please keep in mind, I work for the city of Harrisburg, that we went through, we were extremely close to a bankruptcy situation. We went through Act 47. So I do understand the need to balance budgets and to protect. It's not all about the fire department. I understand you have a public works, you have a parks and rec. Everybody's got needs. So I am sensitive to that we need to take things one step at a time.
Okay. Incidentally, in your fire department, that's Harrisburg, is that correct?
That's correct. City of Harrisburg.
Okay. How many volunteers are in that department?
Our department actually has a really small number of volunteers. We probably only, if you want to know how many are responding on calls, I could probably say 7 to 8.
Okay, rather small. Okay.
Yeah, we even though we're combination on paper, the actual number of staff that ride along are very, very. Now we have a tremendous number of people that claim membership, but they're not necessarily benefiting the residents of the city of Harrisburg, if that makes sense.
Okay, they're not active in the sense of responding to
absolutely
fires. Also, when you were working up the report, when you're preparing the report, was a draft copy submitted to Upper Darby?
There was not necessarily a draft copy, but there was a conversation with Chief Sawyer. I wanted to make sure that the items that I presented were not incredibly insane in terms of acceptance. So I wanted to be a little dialed in. Again, not knowing the community, I let him look and say, hey, does this seem feasible?
Right. You heard me address earlier the comments that were given to me by our district chiefs, by 2 of our district chiefs. And since we have also gotten an email from another representative of one of the volunteer fire departments just prior to this meeting, they have advised me that a second meeting was supposed to have taken place. Can you address that as to why that was not done?
Well, in the first meeting, I had asked them for some things, and I had returned an additional email to them asking for some additional items. There was never any further discussion. I gave them 2 return emails, and quite frankly, the conversation never continued. I explained to them in the first meeting, and I told them quite clearly, I said, I wanted all of their input and they could reach out to me at any time. So certainly I would have liked to have more input from them. Email, they had my email. I responded emails with them, phone calls. You know, I've had several months with no response. So I was available. I certainly would have welcomed that. I think it's unfortunate, and I do apologize that if that responsibility was on me, then I apologize.
I am also told that a number of the detail, a good many of the details about the volunteer fire participation, or I should say the number of volunteers that participate, is information that is on record in fire headquarters. Was that not made available to you, or does it not exist perhaps?
I could not provide, I can tell you within the report, I cannot provide any accurate number on the volunteers. I did not receive any, how can I say, these are the people that we, I don't want to say the word own, these are the people that we have, and this is their level. So I could not present that in the report just with lack of data.
Right. I have one final question, and it's for Chief Sawyer. Chief, what level of participation did you have in the preparation of this report?
Well, basically, I was interviewed on numerous occasions to talk about staffing levels, response time, and things of that nature. So it was more of a question and answer session to kind of fill the void of information that he had not received and provide the training questions.
Have you had an opportunity, Chief, to review this report at this point?
I have had an opportunity to review it.
I'm sorry, you have or have not?
I have.
Okay, yeah. Have you provided any comment to the administration at this point, or is there your comments documented, which could be presented to council as well?
I have not provided any comments. For the mere fact, I was waiting for this presentation to occur and for the report to be submitted. So basically, once the administration has the report, the plan was to have the presentation by 45, and then move forward from there.
Do you expect to have the opportunity to submit a commentary about the report?
I will do whatever's requested of me. That's not a problem.
Very well. That's all my comments at this point and questions.
Okay, so next up, we actually have Councilwoman Billups and Councilman Burke. You have already spoken, so I have to check with others. Just Ms. Billups, before you begin, I just wanted to tag in something that you've already said. I'm sorry. Just as a FYI, we recently passed an ordinance allowing the fire department to collect on the insurance fees that for all the service calls that we do, to finally start collecting those fees. So that's a source of revenue that we never had before, which will help in that regard. I'm very much aware that our administration does have grant writers. The fire department has grant writers, and they're always sending in writing for grant requests on a variety of things. So I just wanted to put that information out there based on, the conversation at hand.
Excellent choice on an ordinance for user fees. That is one of the only mechanisms that fire departments have in terms of recouping some of our costs. We're not like a police department. We don't necessarily have the ability for, citations all the time. Your inspection processes as well. Your inspection processes are also a revenue generating mechanism. When you look at inspections and occupancy permits, they can also be used to generate revenue within the budget for the fire department.
Great. Councilwoman Billups, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Wise, thank you for the presentation. So just want to know, are you aware, sir, that there was also a Pennsylvania constitutional referendum that was on the ballot for the primary?
Absolutely.
And essentially, that could be another revenue, because this program had already existed, but now it allows paid personnel and emergency medical services companies to be eligible to apply for loans.
That was your agency. Thanks to referendum number 4, you are now eligible for the volunteer low interest loan assistance programs, which is a revolving fund at 2% interest. So by all means, please take advantage of that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that clear because it does sound like your recommendation can be kind of pricey, but there are other creative ways that our fire department probably can raise funds. So thank you for.
Yeah, unfortunately, fire departments typically are expensive to run. Our apparatus is $500,000 or more. Staff hours cost money. You are protecting a population that's connected to the city of Philadelphia, very similar. So it's a challenge. I do understand the challenge that Upper Darby Township is facing.
So I have another question.
Yes.
You said about I'm just looking at my notes. I apologize. Something about short of replacement for apparatus, 5 to 7 years for equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would that look like?
Okay,
about
so
leasing equipment. I think you said something about leasing equipment, right?
Yeah, so fire apparatus normally, as a standard practice, depending upon the call volume, and for a very small volunteer fire department, this would not apply, but for an urban department, which your municipality is very urbanized. So I think reasonably, you're going to look at 5 years frontline service and anywhere from 5 to 7 years as a reserve. If it's still in, workable condition, hasn't been run into the ground. So that rotation would exist that in 5 years, every 5 years, that unit, in-service unit would need to be replaced. It would move to reserve. Now, obviously that can be extended. If a unit's still in good workable condition, and if the data such as low maintenance are in place, then, maybe you can stretch out another year. But reasonably, you're probably putting some pretty high mileage on your fire trucks pretty quickly on a day-to-day basis. The issue now is you're making up for the gap of not purchasing over the last 15 years. So everything is dated. That's unfortunate that everything came to head now. I would say in your situation, the can was somewhat kicked down the road. And unfortunately, you're now the city council that's facing this need for, a rather large investment when you look at a $500,000 fire truck. So in leasing, you will sign a lease contract which spreads the cost out of that unit over a 5-year period. So you're not going to have to spend $500,000 up front. You may spend less than that spread out over a 5 to 7 year period, depending upon the agreement of the lease. At the end of that time period, you no longer have, or basically you don't have ownership of that fire truck, even though it's licensed and titled to Upper Darby. It's not a physical asset of Upper Darby. It just stays there. At the end of it, you turn it back in whatever condition it's in, and you can sign a new lease agreement. And I think that I would not say it would be wise to lease the entire fleet, but I think that a lease agreement of 2 or 3 units could buy you some time and speed you up when we're looking at replacing 2 units a year for the next, 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's a tool. I think it's worth investing in examination. The other item too is particularly your small vehicles. I don't know if your police department does this, but leasing has become the norm for a lot of the police departments because your police cars get turned over like real quick. They get beat to death, especially in the urban environment. So I know for our city, we've gone to an entire lease agreement for all small vehicles, our chief's cars, our police chief's vehicles, our public works pickup trucks. Everything's a lease because they get used. And now the city is basically does not face the decline in value of the vehicle.
That makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Councilman Gwynn, have you spoken yet on this? I don't think so. Okay, Councilman Gwynn, you're next.
I was going to ask if Mr. Floyd can tell me if you see more regional fire companies these days because of the cost of the equipment, because of the already existing shared coverages that we have. I know we also picked up coverage for Millbourne. I don't know if that was included in your views or
No,
not.
actually, I was not aware that you're now covering Millbourne. I did not know that. So if you're covering that community, so let me explain real quick. This is actually an interesting subject, Mr. Gwynn, you bring this up. Regionalization within the state is definitely the method to move forward. We have got to share services intergovernmentally. That's a huge win for the state. It's something we haven't done very well in the fire service. Up till this era, we've been very within our geography. Those boundaries have really not let us share. My community, we're currently looking at, we can't necessarily annex, but providing services for 4 outside townships, immediate response. And we do not recoup any cost for that. Every time a fire truck goes out the door, obviously there's a personnel cost, there's a fuel cost, there's a maintenance cost, et cetera, right? So if you're going to, propose services for other communities, I think intergovernmentally you have to work out, I believe, this is my own humble opinion, as a person that's trying to educate local government, I think you do have to calculate what is the cost carried by Upper Darby Township to provide that. Let's say it's only 40 extra calls a year. Well, that one call a year costs something. And, I don't think we can necessarily give free services. So I wasn't aware you're carrying, any regional. I would say this, sometimes we want to bill for outside services, but is that agency also providing services for Upper Darby as well? So the intergovernmental agreement might go both ways. I don't know.
Just to clarify that, we did sign, our mayor did, I believe the mayor signed a contract with them of to pay the township $40,000 a year, at least. I think it's a 1 or 2 year contract. It's a first contract. And then to reassess it after seeing how many calls we responded to Millbourne.
Here's what I can say to the group, and you can take it for what it's worth. Many of these things that I'm hearing, you as a council seem to be very forward thinking. And I believe that the decisions you're making are going to be supportive of Upper Darby Fire Department. I think you're moving things forward very well, or it sounds like you're moving things forward in conjunction with the administration. And I'm hoping a few of my bullets in my report can help polish things up a little.
What are in line with my question about regionalization? A large part of our fire companies are based upon the fixed asset of that fire building. And as you start to regionalize it, you may want to shift to a different building. So that creates a different issue and problem. How have you faced that issue?
Are you speaking about like where the firehouses are actually placed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not uncommon. So ISO, and this is a general measurement, let's say. ISO looks at and states that an engine company, which carries the water, would be placed every 1.5 miles within a jurisdiction. And that's not necessarily feasible in many communities because of the cost. In large cities, that would be astronomical, but that's what they use as a measurement tool. So in moving forward, as your department does begin to expand services, there may be a need down the road to look at movement or construction of a firehouse in a more centralized location. There is one aspect I would like to bring up in the report. Ms. Mara, do I have a moment?
Yes, go ahead. That's fine.
This is a very interesting aspect of the report and something I wanted to make everyone aware of. Currently, your career staffing are placed amongst 4 of the 5 firehouses. The only firehouse that does not receive career staffing is Station 20. So at one time, Station 20 did have career staff, and I was informed that they were removed from there because of basically a hostile work environment between the career and the volunteer professionals. They could not see eye to eye. So the decision was made to vacate the career staff from that firehouse. So they are basically volunteer responders 24/7. And an examination of where that firehouse is, that is actually in the community.
Yelling at me. I'm not yelling at you.
That is your best placed firehouse in terms of centrally responding to a lot of the community. 3 of your firehouses are clustered on the eastern border, Station 20 is in the central portion, and Station 74 is kind of out in its own little island. It would be very beneficial, and I highly recommend, if anything in my report, that some of your career staff be repositioned into Station 20. That firehouse is quickest and best to respond to the other locations as their second support units. And so I was told, quite frankly, by the volunteer members, that career staff would not be welcome there. And I explained to the individual that made that comment that as a group of working professionals, that's considered a hostile work environment. It could be grounds for termination for a volunteer or for a career staff. And then I find it somewhat disheartening that our career and volunteer in the same department can't function together. So I would highly recommend that you move the career staff back into Station 20, that central station. They have apparatus that is absolutely necessary for the township response. I outlined that detail of that in my report. I was very disheartened by that. And so that's one recommendation I would really think that should happen.
And aside from fire apparatus itself, do we need to look at EMS services?
Yeah, so currently now, I believe, talking to Chief Sawyer, and again, if he's on, he can expand on this. Your department now is beginning to expand responses for cardiac and EMS related calls, which is basically a standard now amongst fire services. Almost every fire department in the nation has embraced emergency medical service response. If you have EMTs, obviously all firefighters are CPR trained. It is imperative that we push our fire trucks out to support EMS response as well. That's going to cause additional wear and tear on apparatus and additional call volume. But an individual in cardiac arrest is just as important as a building on fire.
That concludes my questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we currently don't have any EMS connected directly to our fire department.
Yeah.
Just as a clarification.
Yeah, the integration of EMS is another step, and that's a very, very deep consideration to make. But in terms of being a QRS service, consider a QRS, that is absolutely worth the investment.
Gotcha. Okay, any other questions besides Councilman Burke? Seeing none, Councilman Burke.
Thank you, President Wentz. Mr. Wise, a couple questions still. I'll give you the first question. Maybe Mrs. Morrow can figure out. My calculation is $75,000 a month, not $130,000 a month. So could you give me the breakdown on that? Why I have a few more questions? I would appreciate that.
You mean to the volunteer firehouses?
That's correct. It was stated 130,000. Calculation I have is 75,000. So why I ask a couple questions, somebody can figure that out. So your report was done through COVID, 15 months of COVID. Fire training center was closed due to COVID. So the volunteers basically haven't had any training for the last 15 months. Am I correct?
I could not answer that. I'm not in the department.
Okay. Well, most of the training throughout the United States, this probably has lack of training due to COVID.
It has affected training. That's a fair assessment.
Okay. And your report has a lot to do about the lack of training of the volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
So not so great fairness to that. Correct assessment, but during this COVID times, which everybody likes to say COVID, not fair to the volunteers that can't get to the training. So I like to just put that out there. What is the requirement of the state to ride on the fire truck, to a fire, to an accident?
So interestingly enough, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has never taken a stance on minimum requirements. The state does not have a minimum requirement. The National Fire Protection Association and ISO are the standards that those measurements are made by.
Is there a national certification?
Yes, there is national certification.
Okay. And did you find, well, I guess you didn't get all the reports from the volunteer firehouses,
no.
But if, would you be safe to say if all the men and women that ride on the trucks on the weekends have the national certification, that is a good standard to have to start, not a risk assessment, but a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the training audit process, going back and not having the records, what I would highly recommend is somebody runs all staff records, career and volunteer, all staff. I don't care. It shouldn't even say career volunteer. It should just say member of the department. And then behind that, I want to see firefighter 1, firefighter 2, hazmat, date of completion. Like basically, I want to take a look at a snapshot of how many trained, qualified people do we have in our township. And I'm sure that could be done internally. That's not that difficult.
And obviously it would be a lot easier as the requirements of COVID get lifted over the next month or two, hopefully.
Absolutely.
That was a couple of my concerns that, maybe the report wasn't a great time to do it. I'm glad we did it because we've had a lot of good conversation about it. The 130,000 to 75 is a big difference in a month.
I brought the report up, and let me to clarify that because I want to be accurate. I'm going to read you. Can everyone still see me, right? So my report reads, currently an agreement exists with local government of Upper Darby Township financial rewards each five separate private volunteer departments in the amount of $30,000 per organization or $150,000 total monthly. Annually, this would calculate to $1.8 million, which passes to the nonprofit 501(c) volunteer departments that is earmarked for weekend staff, personnel costs, and purchase of tools or expendables of the firehouse on an annual basis. And that agreement has been occurring for several years. Does that sound more accurate?
Yeah, I was looking at the 130 as the payroll, basically, the way it was brought out to us, or we were speaking. I just wanted, I was more looking at the payroll that actually goes, you were talking about the monthly cost, and I knew that was a little high.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's the correct numbers. It's hard for me to be on Zoom and looking at my report at the same time. I got to go back and forth. Sorry.
It's hard to read your report and follow everything too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Chief Sawyer, then actually Councilman Tunis because he hasn't spoken yet, and then Ms. Billups. So Chief Sawyer.
Thank you, Council President. I need to rebut on the training thing. So 15 months is a long time, but any volunteer that has been with the department for 2 years or more should have been properly trained. So yes, during those 15 months, any new person should have passed because of the fire training being shut down. But any person that's a volunteer that's been volunteering for more than 2 years have had ample time to have their training completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then Councilman Tunis.
I'm sorry, I just need to speak real quickly. I'm having computer issues. It looks like the state has an automatic update happening to my system. I may be disconnected from the meeting. So if that happens, I will call in quickly because I don't know how long it will take for my computer to come back up. But I do have some closing words if I could then when you're done. So hopefully I'll be able to connect that way. Thank you and sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Tunis.
Yeah, I was going to say we've spent about almost 2 hours on this subject. We've debated, we've heard a lot of great stuff from Mr. Wise and Ms. Morrow. She did just ask if she could do a closure. I was going to ask if following her closure, could I make a motion to move on to the next agenda item?
You don't really need to make a motion because there's no, but we can go move on to her closure, and you don't really need to make a motion to move on. We can just do it.
Okay.
Is that okay? Councilwoman Billups is the only other person that would be missed out.
Yeah, no, I was going to suggest the same thing now that Ms. Morrow said that she had some closure. So if we can just hear her closing remarks and we can move on because we still have public comments.
Yep. So Ms. Morrow, please take it away.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for listening to the recommendations and the report that Floyd presented. I wanted to just mention that the process is designed to support and assist the township to build your capacity and increase your efficiencies. Typically, we come face-to-face in person, but due to the pandemic, Floyd did have to work virtually. We still are teleworking, so that was a different situation that we tried to work through. You mentioned about you passed the fire insurance escrow ordinance. That should be filed with DCED. So if you haven't sent it to us, please do. We have a database that we put your contact information, and that shows that we've received that ordinance and that DCED has that on file. That's very important. If you don't do that, the insurance company won't pay those fees. Grant funding, the MAP assistance program is a very competitive grant, but it is available through the DCED website, dced.pa.gov, and you can search program funding and put in the municipal assistance program. And that could be a funding that may assist you with doing any of the implementations of the recommendations that Floyd has in his report. If you have any follow-up questions, I would ask that you contact me directly and not Floyd. He is working on another program now, and we want to make sure that we have the right resources, and perhaps either myself or Madra Clay, who is the program manager, can assist and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And also wanted to clarify, Chief Sawyer sent us a message that our fire departments, our firehouses do provide EMS services. So I just wanted to get that message out there. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Wise, or Chief Wise, for giving us your insight and your recommendations for our township. You know, is very thorough. Sorry about the confusion in the beginning, but we do greatly appreciate all your hard work on this study and sharing it all with us. So I did send it out to everyone as you figured out, and thank you for your due diligence in answering all of council's questions. I know that we are a interesting bunch of elected officials, and we all have very, different varying questions. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time answering all of our questions.
I don't believe you're any different than any other city council. You're representing your constituents, which is exactly what your job should be. Thank you very much for all of your time.
Thank you. All right, so we're moving on as soon as I can find my agenda. Sorry, I got it misplaced. Aha, here it is. Yay, okay. So next up, we have approval of our minutes of, sorry, just looking, approval of the minutes for a council meeting for April 21st, 2021. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? I see.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, so Sadiq and Gwen. And Gwen, are there any questions or concerns on the minutes? Seeing none, please turn your mics on. Council members. Please ignore the noise in the background of my realm. My cats are getting into something. All right, so all those in favor of passing the minutes of April 21st, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say your name. Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next up, we have our public forum. Yay. So unfortunately, Ms. Alexis is not here to navigate the list. Did we, Allison, I'm sorry, I did not get a chance to check my email to see. Oh, you did send us the public comment list. I just, Ms. Phillips, do you have the list?
Yes, I have the list.
Awesome, you rock. All right, so, oh, here it is. Okay, great. Wonderful. So, Ms. Phillips and I are the timers. So let me get my timer going. Timer. I'm the 3 minute and Ms. Phillips is 2.5 minutes. The 2.5 minute warning, okay? Okay, so call our first speaker. And for all the residents that are speaking, please state your name and your address so that we can get back into that natural pattern. I know you may have provided that information to sign up to begin with, but for our record keeping for our minutes, we need that information out of practice. Okay, so go ahead, Ms. Phillips.
Sure, thank you. Our first speaker is Terry Bradley.
Oh, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have my timer. If I may go now. It's
And-
Terry Diaz Bradley at 1213 Morgan Avenue in Drexel Hill, and I'm going to start my timer as well.
You have started.
Okay. At the last council meeting, Vince Rongione made mention with what appeared to be derision and contempt of how many right-to-know requests I had requested, as if there were limits to how much information residents are allowed to request. In the end, it's just a distraction because his personal opinion about any resident of the township is really irrelevant. What is relevant is that the mayor, Barbara Ann Keffer, is refusing to enforce public safety measures that have been in place for decades. Worse still, she has used taxpayer dollars to pay the township's lawyers to fight residents asking for this information regarding hazards. Mayor Keffer has, in essence, weaponized the residents' lawyers against the residents ourselves. State officials had to intervene to make sure I received the information I requested. There are 100-foot hazard trees all over the township that are dropping massive limbs onto the very spaces where our kids ride their bikes, young moms stroll their babies, and where we all live in our homes. Many of these massive diseased trees have fallen, and those that haven't will fall, all the while spreading disease to all the healthy trees remaining. The threat is imminent and real. Mayor Keffer has ignored this danger despite having special knowledge and accountability because she voluntarily certified herself as a tree tender. She knows exactly what the experts' reports mean and why they recommended immediate removal of these trees. She understands thoroughly and better than most the dangers and risks resulting from her failure to enforce these laws. Perhaps a discussion on piercing the veil is next, but this we know for certain. Negligent property owners tell us who they are. And Mayor Barbara Ann Keffer, by ignoring experts' warnings and failing to enforce public safety measures, persists in telling us who she is. Let us all choose to believe her. The only issue left is what council plans on doing about it. When Mayor Keffer ignores any law, she disenfranchises the voters of this township. She silences our voices and negates our votes. We voted for a council who legislated public safety measures, and yet in essence, Mayor Keffer is saying, I don't care. I don't care that the voters wanted this and that council legislated to reflect what the voters wanted. I personally don't like the law because it's messy, so I'm not going to enforce it. It's a slippery slope. For the mayor, her role has become more about what she wants than what the residents of Upper Darby want. Mayor Keffer cannot simply ignore the law. If she doesn't like the law, she must ask council to repeal it. Allowing the mayor to unilaterally decide she's not going to enforce the law is dangerous, and especially in the face of complete silence from council. And that is where the slippery slope really comes in, because where does it stop? Would council remain silent if the public safety measures being ignored by the mayor were about police brutality or lead in our water pipes or toxic waste dumping in the creek? Allowing the mayor to pick and choose which laws she will enforce and which she will not is astonishingly dangerous and fundamentally undemocratic. That's why we have council, equally as powerful as the mayor, who write and pass laws and keep the mayor in check. Council needs to do something about this sooner rather than later. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Okay, Solicitor Richardson.
Thank you, President Wentz. My understanding, and thank you, Ms. Bradley, for your commentary, specifically referring to the right to know request. The number that were submitted to the Office of Open Records was 21. All 20 were denied. 20 records were denied in terms of appeal. Additionally, L&I has spent an extensive amount of time reviewing approximately 4 arborist reports, and none of the arborist reports have required or requested that the trees be removed. The director of L&I has been involved. He has issued his complete findings. He has closed the file. So I just wanted to update council where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And our next speaker, Ms. Phillips.
Ms. Sharon Long.
Council President Wentz, it does not appear that Ms. Long has signed in to the meeting.
Okay. All right, well, then we'll move ahead, and if she joins us before we get to the end, then we'll hop in to cover her.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michael Law.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we're going to start your time. If you can say your name and your address for us, and we're starting your time now.
Michael Law, Chief Warrant Officer 3, United States Army, retired, 308 South Bishop Avenue, Seacane, 19018. On May 2nd, my wife, Anne Marie Law, passed away. She was a township employee for several years. Due to the incompetence of human resources, it took 3 weeks to provide me with information for her life insurance, but failed to provide information on retirement. I have to say that the form letter for the life insurance was the coldest and most unemotional letter that I have seen. There were no condolences sent on behalf of the township until I called them on it. Is this a practice this administration promotes? And understand, the maximum effective range of an excuse is 0 meters. Not caring about township employees and their families is outright inexcusable and callous. And as of today, I have not received any information on her retirement benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm so sorry for your loss. We will definitely look into it and make sure that we get back to you as soon as we can. And
again, Michael Law, I just want to interject that I didn't have any information, but please accept our condolences on behalf of council.
Thank
so,
you.
Laura, can we get Scott to get his paperwork out to him tomorrow?
I will. I'll reach out to Scott tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Law, can you? Yeah, we'll
Yes.
work on it. Okay.
That's the least I ask.
Definitely. I'm really sorry for your loss, and we'll look into the letter that you referenced. For sure.
Thank you. The mayor's office got it.
Well, the letter that you referenced, as far as the letter that went out to you, I think we need to.
Well, the form letter that went out to me was very cold.
Right, that's what I mean. I'm gonna ask to see that letter personally.
Okay.
Because I did not know. So. Yes, Councilman Burke.
Thank you, Laura. Mr. Law, were you told the letter was sent out to you? The forms were sent out to you? Were they sent out to you, Mr. Law?
Yeah,
you told by administration?
After I called them multiple times. Yes.
You were told that they were sent out to you, correct?
Correct.
And you haven't received them?
I received them Friday.
Okay. And when were you told they were sent out to you, sir?
Well, I called May 5th, on or about May 5th.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Wagner, did you have your hand up?
I did, just very briefly. I simply wanted to say to you, Mr. Law, I have it on real good authority that your wife was just a wonderful, sweet person, and we are all very, very sorry and extend our condolences to you and your whole family.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Law, I'm so sorry about the loss of your wife. This is Councilwoman Michelle Billups. And Councilman Silva and I, we're on the pension board, Mr. Silva, and Bob Gwynn. So I don't, maybe that's something that we can look into.
I don't know what your policies are. I cannot find anything online.
Okay, well, we'll thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. We will definitely look into it in all the different avenues that we have. And I will make sure, what was your wife's name again? I'm sorry, I was taking.
Anne Marie Law.
Anne Marie.
A.W.
Anne Marie. I will make sure to add her to our moment of silence for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Has Ms. Dobbins, has the woman who
Ms. Long.
Madam President, I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Councilman Burnett. Go ahead.
Thank you. My condolences as well, Mr. Law, for the loss of your wife. She was a lovely lady.
Thank you.
But I do want to comment that I have received a complaint as well from.
I'm sorry, Councilman Burnett, we lost you for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Right. Similar to Mr. Law's comments, I received a comment as well. I'm not prepared to identify the person because I've been asked not to get involved in this unless the person does not get a response from the township. But she too has lost her husband, a former employee, and that is having difficulty getting a response from our HR department in regard to insurance, life insurance. So I just wanted to corroborate that Mr. Law's position in this, that he is not out there by himself. There are other people. It's systemic. We need to do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you. And apparently it's an HR issue, not a Scott issue. So just for clarification. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Law. We will definitely look into it. So Ms. Dobbins, Ms. Long is not on yet. Okay. There is no one else signed up to speak at this time. Is that correct?
That was the full list of people who signed up by the 6:55 deadline.
Okay. All right. So that being said, seeing no more residents signed up in time to speak at this meeting, public forum is now closed. The Honorable Mayor Barbara Ann Keffer is next.
Good evening. It's a little bit after 9 p.m. tonight, and I have a couple of updates. I would like to thank Chief Derek Sawyer and all the members of the Upper Darby Fire.
Mayor Keffer, wait.
Yep.
No, we lost you after thanking Chief Sawyer.
I'd like to thank Chief Sawyer. I'm unmuted. And all the members of the Upper Darby Fire Department who assisted with the 2 cleanups that happened over this weekend on May 22nd, Saturday, and May 23rd at the Second Ward Playground and the Swedish Cabin, respectively. On a related note, by the state Department of Community and Economic Development on their fire department management study. My administration applied for and was awarded this opportunity in early 2020. And I would like to thank the career and volunteer firefighters who worked with the DCED over the last year to make the study as thorough as possible. The study will be available on the Township website after our meeting tonight. A little more than a week away, Habitat for Humanity is sponsoring a Rock the Block event in Upper Darby. The targeted areas are the 200 block of Chapman Avenue and the municipal parking lot on the 700 block of Long Lane. I'm really grateful that Habitat has chosen Upper Darby as a focused municipality. And going forward, I would like Habitat to be one of our partners here. Habitat for Humanity does more than build new housing, which we have we don't have a lot of space, so we're not doing a lot of new housing here. But we want to improve the housing and the public spaces that we do have. This June 5th is our inaugural, Habitat Rock the Block event. And there is an opportunity for members of our community to participate this year. And tomorrow we will send a link for volunteer spots on our Facebook page and our website. And I do encourage residents to like and or follow the township Facebook page in general, but we do need, a couple volunteers for June 5th. It's been an interesting and it's been a sad week because Park Police Superintendent Scott Mahoney away, and today he was laid to rest.
Mayor Keffer, hold on one second. Oh. My computer saying that the recording has stopped. Is the recording still going? It's just me that's having that problem?
It could be rain is going on as well.
I think we're
And
all
thunder
having issues.
and lightning.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, go ahead, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure we didn't. Go ahead, Mayor. Though I think you're frozen. Having some signal issues. The storm is coming through. Military in honor of Memorial Day. There's also a Memorial Day celebration for Archer Epler, VFW Post, VFW and American Legion. So I just, so there is a Zoom presentation on Sunday, May 30th at 12:30 p.m. We'll share it on our Facebook page. I'll share the link with everyone on council. Mayor Keffer and myself are taking part in it with other elected officials. So thank you very much for that. And I see Mayor on as well. So Mayor Keffer, if you want to continue your report, I just kind of filled in with my mini version of my report while we were all having technical snags.